At 2:15 on June 24th, 1944, Lieutenant Commander Richard O'Kane peered through the periscope of the USS Tang, tracking four Japanese cargo ships as the convoy plowed through the darkness 3,200 yards ahead. At 33 years old, he had already completed two war patrols, but the weight of loss hung heavy on his shoulders. His mentor was gone. The convoy before him consisted of six large vessels, guarded by no fewer than 16 escort destroyers, a formidable target that most submarine commanders would avoid. O'Kane had cut his teeth on submarine warfare under Dudley Morton aboard the USS WWII, where Morton had taught him tactics that flew in the face of official Navy doctrine. Forget the manual's directive to attack from the safe flanks of convoys, Morton had insisted. Dive straight into the formation, fire ahead and behind. Let chaos be your cover. But Morton was gone now. The Wahoo had sunk 3 months after O'Kane left to take command of the Tang, claiming 79 lives in the Sea of Japan in October 1943. The Pacific Fleet's most revered submarine commander had vanished beneath the waves, and O'Kane inherited not just his mentor's unorthodox tactics, but a silent debt to honor. The Tang's first patrol in February 1944 had shown immense promise. 5 ships sunk, 16 torpedoes fired, 16 direct hits. But the Imperial Japanese Navy was adapting quickly. Convoys now sailed with heavier escort screens, captains zigzagged relentlessly, and depth charges rained down faster than ever before. The Tang's second patrol in April yielded nothing. No attacks, no enemy tonnage sunk. While the submarine did rescue 22 downed Navy pilots near Truk during carrier strikes, a vital mission in its own right, it did nothing to advance the submarine fleet's core objective of crippling Japan's logistics. This third patrol needed results, and O'Kane had brought the Tang to the Yellow Sea, the narrow waterway between Korea and China, where Japanese supply routes were dense. Troops bound for China, convoys carrying materiel south from Manchuria, and merchant ships shuttling critical goods. On June 21st, the Tang spotted a lone freighter. O'Kane ordered a single torpedo fired at close range, sending the Nanshin Maru to the bottom in just 4 minutes. 2 days later, another solo target appeared. O'Kane fired from 750 yards, splitting the Nikken Maru in two. But these small victories weren't enough. O'Kane craved the heavily guarded formations that other skippers steered clear of, and at 2:15 on June 24th, he had found one. 6 cargo ships, 16 destroyers, and enough tonnage to etch his name into history. The Tang closed in, the distance shrinking from 2,800 yards to 2,400. O'Kane ordered battle stations, fire control teams calculated firing solutions, and torpedo men stood at the ready. At 2,000 yards, he gave the unthinkable command: surface attack, full speed. The Tang surged out of the darkness and straight into the heart of the convoy, a maneuver that violated every safety protocol in the Navy playbook. No submarine commander had ever dared attack a convoy this way. O'Kane fired 3 torpedoes at the nearest cargo ship, then shifted aim and launched 3 more at a second target. Before he could confirm the hits, explosions erupted across the water. 2 cargo vessels burst into flames, but O'Kane soon saw something extraordinary. 4 ships were burning, not 2. The torpedo spread had been wider than calculated, punching through the intended targets and striking 2 additional freighters behind them. The Tamahoko Maru, Tainan Maru, Nasusun Maru, and Kenichi Maru, 16,292 tons of enemy shipping, were destroyed in just 90 seconds. The Tang dove as Japanese escorts swarmed in, and depth charges hammered the hull for 20 minutes. But O'Kane had pulled off the most devastating single strike in U.S. submarine warfare history. If you want to see how he turned this into the greatest submarine record of all time, hit that like button. It helps us share more of these forgotten stories. Subscribe if you haven't already, and let's get back to O'Kane. That night changed everything. O'Kane had proven Morton's aggressive tactics worked. For the rest of June, the Tang hunted without mercy. Another freighter sunk on June 25th, 2 more in 12 hours on June 30th. By July 3rd, the Tang was heading home with 10 ships sunk and 39,000 tons destroyed, the most successful war patrol ever completed by an American submarine. O'Kane's 4th patrol in August added 5 more vessels to his tally, His fifth patrol in September would shatter every remaining record, but that final mission would end in tragedy. 24 torpedoes fired, 22 perfect hits, one miss, and a last torpedo that would curve left at 46 knots, racing back toward the Tang in the darkness. The Tang arrived at Pearl Harbor on July 12, 1944, after a 34-day patrol. Admiral Charles Lockwood, commander of the Pacific Fleet's submarine force, was waiting at the dock. He had reviewed every detail of the patrol report, and he knew what it meant. No American submarine had ever confirmed 10 kills in a single mission. Lockwood recommended O'Kane for the Navy Cross, but the numbers only told part of the story. O'Kane's tactics had defied every rule, surfacing in the middle of enemy convoys, firing at point-blank range, attacking multiple targets before diving, none of which aligned with the Navy's standard doctrine, which dictated attacking from outside formations, staying at periscope depth, and diving immediately after firing. Some commanders called it reckless, others saw it as revolutionary. The Tang underwent 3 weeks of maintenance, fresh torpedoes loaded, engines overhauled, and 2 new crew members brought on to replace those who had requested transfers. O'Kane's aggressive style wasn't for everyone. On August 4th, the Tang departed for its 4th war patrol, bound for the home waters of Honshu, Japan. This patrol zone was far more dangerous than previous ones. Closer to Japan meant heavier air cover, more escort destroyers, and better trained anti-submarine crews. American submarines operating near Japan faced triple the detection risk of those in southern waters, but O'Kane cared little for risk calculations. He cared about tonnage. On August 10th, the Tang spotted a tanker near Omizaki. O'Kane fired 3 torpedoes, all of which missed as the tanker zigzagged unpredictably. It was the first miss of O'Kane's career, and it wouldn't be the last. The next day, another convoy appeared, 2 freighters and 2 escorts. O'Kane fired at the larger freighter, scoring 3 direct hits. The explosion was so violent that debris rained down on the Tang's deck. The 6,000-ton Ruko Maru sank quickly. 5 minutes later, O'Kane targeted the second freighter, firing 2 torpedoes that hit home, sending the Nansatamaru to the bottom, stern first. On August 22nd, the Tang sank a small patrol yacht with a single torpedo. On August 23rd, it destroyed the 8,135-ton transport Tukushi Maru with 3 torpedoes, 2 of which struck under the stack. The final attack of the patrol came on August 25th. O'Kane used his last 3 torpedoes to sink the tanker Nango Nanomaru while the escort fled. When the Tang returned to Pearl Harbor on September 3rd, it had sunk 5 more ships, bringing O'Kane's total to 20 across 4 patrols. Most submarine commanders completed 6 to 8 patrols during the entire war. O'Kane had sunk 20 ships in just 7 months. Admiral Lockwood offered O'Kane a safe shore assignment, a teaching position at submarine school, a staff job at headquarters, any role that kept him out of harm's way. But O'Kane requested 1 more patrol. Lockwood approved. The Tang would depart on September 24th, bound for the Formosa Strait, the most heavily defended waterway in the Western Pacific. O'Kane spent 3 weeks preparing, studying convoy routes, analyzing Japanese escort patterns, and calculating torpedo angles for the narrow strait between Formosa and mainland China. The Tang was loaded with 24 Mark 18 electric torpedoes, the newest model in the Navy's arsenal. These torpedoes left no wake, making them far harder for Japanese lookouts to detect. But the Mark 18 had a documented flaw. Less than 1% of the time, its steering mechanism would fail, causing the torpedo to circle uncontrollably. On September 24th, the Tang slipped out of Pearl Harbor before dawn, carrying 87 crew members. Only 9 would ever see their homes again. The Tang refueled at Midway Island on September 27th, and O'Kane reviewed his mission orders one final time. His target area stretched between northwest Formosa and the China coast, a narrow passage where Japanese convoy routes converged, but reaching it meant navigating waters fully controlled by the enemy. Minefields extended 60 miles northeast from Formosa, and Japanese patrol boats swept the approaches constantly. American submarines entering this area faced triple the normal detection rate. O'Kane had 2 options: join a coordinated attack group led by Commander Coy aboard the USS Silversides, traveling with 3 other submarines for safety in numbers, or go alone. He chose the latter. The Tang departed midway on September 27, heading west with no contact with other American vessels and strict radio silence, and measured to avoid detection by Japanese direction-finding stations. For 12 days, the Tang navigated enemy-controlled waters in intense silence. Sonar operators listened for patrol boats, radar operators scanned for aircraft, and the crew rotated through 4-hour watch shifts. By October 10th, the Tang reached the operational zone undetected. O'Kane brought the submarine to periscope depth, but the strait was empty, no targets in sight. That night at 2200 hours, radar picked up multiple contacts, a convoy. O'Kane closed in, and through the periscope, he counted 2 medium freighters steaming south along the China coast. The Tang surfaced, and O'Kane ordered battle stations. At 23:30, he fired 4 torpedoes, 2 hitting the first freighter, the Joshua, which erupted in flames. The second freighter, the Omaru, took 1 torpedo amidships and sank in 6 minutes. It was the first blood of the 5th Patrol. The Tang dove as Japanese escorts dropped depth charges for 40 minutes, but none came close. When the submarine resurfaced at 3 a.m., the burning wreckage had vanished beneath the waves. The next 13 days passed without significant contacts, only small fishing boats and single patrol craft. Nothing worth expending a torpedo on. O'Kane pushed the Tang deeper into dangerous waters, closer to Formosa and its Japanese air bases, the risk increasing with every mile north. October 23rd arrived, and at 1700 hours, radar detected a massive formation. O'Kane counted the contacts: 3 tankers, 1 transport, 1 freighter, and at least 8 escort destroyers, possibly more. It was the largest convoy the Tang had encountered since the Yellow Sea Patrol. O'Kane called the crew to battle stations, planning a night surface attack, the same tactics that had worked in June. But this convoy was different. Heavier escorts, a tighter formation, and captains who had survived American submarine attacks before. The Tang tracked the convoy for 6 hours as O'Kane plotted approach angles, fire control calculated solutions for multiple targets, and torpedo men prepared the tubes. At 2300 hours, O'Kane gave the order: surface at full speed. The Tang surged out of the darkness and charged straight into the formation. The night exploded in violence as O'Kane fired at the nearest tanker, 2 torpedoes striking under the stack and engine room, igniting flames so bright they illuminated the entire convoy. He shifted aim, firing a single torpedo at the stern of the middle tanker, a direct hit, then 2 more at the farthest tanker, both striking the engine space. 3 tankers were burning, and the attack had lasted just 90 seconds. Then a Japanese transport turned directly toward the Tang at full speed, attempting to ram. There was no time to dive. O'Kane ordered emergency maneuvers. The Tang's diesel engines screamed as the submarine accelerated hard to port, turning inside the transport's turning radius. The enemy captain tried to compensate, but it was too late. His ship's momentum carried it past the Tang's stern, missing by less than 50 yards. But the transport's new course sent it straight into one of the burning tankers. The 2 vessels collided with a metallic shriek that echoed across the water. O'Kane didn't wait to watch. He aimed the Tang's stern tubes at both crippled ships, firing 2 torpedoes that hit home, sending the transport and tanker down together. 5 ships destroyed in one attack. A destroyer raced toward the Tang's position, and O'Kane ordered a crash dive. The submarine submerged in 45 seconds, and depth charges began to fall. 37 explosions in 20 minutes. The closest detonation cracked light fixtures in the control room. When silence returned, O'Kane brought the Tang back to periscope depth as dawn approached. The convoy remnants had scattered, and a slick of burning oil covered the water for miles. The Tang dove deep and headed east. The crew needed rest, and O'Kane needed to count the remaining torpedoes. 18 had been fired on the 5th Patrol. 6 left. October 24 arrived, and the Tang surfaced at 6 a.m. The morning sun revealed empty waters, so O'Kane ordered a course change north along the China coast. At 1400, lookouts spotted smoke on the horizon, another convoy. O'Kane tracked the formation through the periscope. It was smaller but more heavily escorted, with 3 cargo ships, 1 tanker, and multiple destroyers in a tight defensive formation. The Tang followed at periscope depth throughout the afternoon as O'Kane waited for darkness. Night attacks had worked twice, and they would work again. Sunset came at 6 p.m., and full darkness fell by 7 p.m. At 10 p.m., O'Kane ordered battle stations. At 11 p.m., the Tang surfaced 1,500 yards from the convoy. O'Kane aimed at the lead cargo ship, firing 2 torpedoes that hit home, splitting the freighter in half. The Tang turned toward the second target, launching 2 more torpedoes, one hitting the stern, causing the vessel to list heavily but remain afloat. Only 2 torpedoes remained. A destroyer detected the Tang's position and turned toward the submarine at flank speed, the distance shrinking to 800 yards, then 700. O'Kane aimed the final 2 torpedoes at the charging destroyer, but both missed. The enemy was too close, too fast, and the torpedoes needed time and distance to arm. The Tang dove as depth charges hammered the hull. 53 explosions, the worst barrage of the patrol. The Tang survived, but now its torpedo tubes were empty. O'Kane surfaced 2 hours later to find the convoy gone. 2 ships damaged, 1 sunk. It wasn't enough. He checked the torpedo room inventory one final time, only to discover a mistake. The crew had miscounted. 1 Mark 18 torpedo remained in the aft torpedo room, in Tube 8, the last weapon aboard the Tang. O'Kane scanned the horizon. Dawn was 3 hours away. If another convoy appeared, the Tang would have one final chance. At 200 hours on October 25th, radar detected multiple contacts, 5 ships heading south. O'Kane called battle stations for the last time. The Tang had 1 torpedo left, 1 chance, an attack that would either complete the most successful patrol in submarine warfare history or end in failure. O'Kane ordered the Tang to surface and closed in, with the last torpedo being loaded into Tube 8. The submarine raced toward the convoy at flank speed, and through the periscope, O'Kane identified 5 ships, 2 cargo vessels, 2 transports, 1 large tanker, flanked by destroyer escorts. At 2,200 yards, O'Kane climbed to the bridge, opting for a night surface attack. The same approach that had worked on October 23rd. Drive into the formation, fire at point-blank range, use confusion as cover. The Tang accelerated, the distance shrinking to 1,800 yards, then 1,500. The convoy maintained course and showing no sign of detecting the submarine. At 1,200 yards, O'Kane gave the order, fire Tube 1. The torpedo raced straight for the nearest transport. 20 seconds later, an explosion lit the night, lifting the transport's stern from the water as secondary blasts tore through its cargo holds. O'Kane shifted aim as the second transport crossed the Tang's bow, firing Tube 2, a direct hit amidships that caused the vessel to list immediately. Now 1,000 yards from the convoy's center, the large tanker loomed ahead, the biggest remaining target. O'Kane aimed for its engine room and fired Tube 3. The torpedo struck under the stack, igniting aviation fuel and sending flames 300 feet into the air. The Tang turned hard to port, and 2 cargo ships steamed parallel to its new course. Perfect firing position. O'Kane launched Tubes 4 and 5 in quick succession. Both hit, 1 cargo ship exploding and the other sinking bow first. 5 ships hit, 23 torpedoes fired on the patrol, 22 finding their targets. Only 1 miss against the destroyer. And Tube 8 still held the last Mark 18, the final weapon aboard the Tang. A destroyer escort broke formation and charged the Tang's position, closing to 800 yards as its deck guns opened fire, shells splashing near the conning tower. O'Kane aimed the final torpedo at the charging destroyer. Fire control calculated the solution. Speed 26 knots, range 700 yards, bearing 035 degrees. At 2:30 on October 25, 1944, O'Kane gave the order, fire Tube 8. The Mark 18 torpedo launched, its electric motor engaging silently with no wake. For 3 seconds, it tracked perfectly toward the destroyer. Then it broached the surface, its propeller breaking above the waterline. The torpedo curved left, not a gentle turn, but a sharp arc back toward the Tang, a circular run. O'Kane screamed orders, emergency power, full right rudder. The Tang began turning hard to starboard, its screws churning the water as diesel engines pushed maximum thrust. The torpedo completed its arc, now racing directly at the Tang. 400 yards away, then 300. The submarine couldn't turn fast enough. It needed 60 seconds to complete the maneuver, but the torpedo would reach it in 15. At 200 yards, crewmen on the bridge saw it coming, a white phosphorescent trail in the dark water heading straight for the aft torpedo room. At 100 yards, O'Kane ordered everyone to brace. Some men jumped overboard, others grabbed stanchions. Torpedo man Hayes Trucker watched from the bridge as the Tang's own weapon closed in. At 50 yards, 20 seconds had passed since launch, the same amount of time the Tang's other 23 torpedoes had needed to reach their targets. At 20 yards, the Mark 18 struck the Tang's stern 3 feet below the waterline, directly beside the aft torpedo room where it had been loaded minutes earlier. The explosion tore through 3 compartments instantly, hurling men against bulkheads. Control room personnel felt the impact through the steel decking. Lights shattered, circuit breakers sparked, and the stern dropped immediately. Water flooded the aft torpedo room in seconds, then the after engine room, then the maneuvering room. 3 compartments gone before damage control could react. The Tang began sinking stern first. 9 officers and men were on the bridge when the torpedo hit, including O'Kane. The explosion's force hurled 3 men overboard. 6 remained as the Tang went down. It hit the bottom at 2:31, 1 minute after the torpedo struck, 180 feet below the surface. The impact sent shock waves through the remaining compartments, and men in the forward sections felt the collision with the seafloor. Of the 9 men thrown from the bridge, only 3 survived long enough in the water to be rescued: O'Kane, Lieutenant Lawrence Savadkin, and motor machinist mate Jesse Dilva. 1 more officer escaped from the flooded conning tower, Lieutenant Junior Grade Henry Flanagan, who fought his way through rising water to the surface. 4 survivors floated in oil-slicked water as Japanese destroyer escorts closed in. Inside the Tang, 30 men remained alive in the forward torpedo room. The aft sections were completely flooded. 78 men had died in the initial explosion or drowned in the flooded compartments. The 30 survivors faced a grim choice: stay inside and suffocate when the air ran out, or attempt to escape from 180 feet down using Momsen lungs. Emergency breathing devices developed in 1929 after the USS-4 sank with all hands. A rubber bag connected to a mouthpiece, the Momsen lung recycled exhaled breath through a carbon dioxide absorbent. But no one had ever successfully used it to escape a submarine in combat conditions. Training exercises were conducted in shallow, controlled waters, not 180 feet deep. The survivors prepared, burning classified documents, destroying code books, and opening the forward escape trunk. Then they waited as a Japanese patrol vessel circled overhead, dropping depth charges that triggered an electrical fire in the forward battery compartment. Heat intensified, and paint on the bulkheads began to melt. At 4 a.m., 2 hours after the Tang sank, the Japanese patrol vessel moved away. The first man to attempt escape was motor machinist mate Clayton Decker. He secured the Momsen lung, flooded the trunk, opened the outer hatch, and began ascending, 10 feet at a time, stopping to count to 10 each time. Breathing became difficult at 60 feet, but the pain passed. At 40 feet, he could see moonlight filtering through the water. He broke the surface at 4:15, 1 hour and 45 minutes after the Tang sank. 12 more men followed Decker through the escape trunk, 13 total attempting the ascent, but only 8 reached the surface alive. 5 died from lung ruptures, air embolisms, or nitrogen narcosis. By 6 a.m., 9 men floated in the water: O'Kane, Savadkin, Flanagan, Dilva, Decker, radio technician Floyd Caverly, boatswain's mate William Leibold, torpedo man Hayes Trucker, and torpedo man Pete Narawansky. 9 survivors out of 87. At 7:30, the Japanese destroyer escort Tachikaze arrived, pulling the 9 Americans from the water one by one. O'Kane climbed onto the deck last, his legs barely functional after 8 hours in the ocean. On the Tachikaze's deck, Japanese sailors formed a gauntlet. The Americans walked between 2 lines as fists struck their faces, boots connected with their ribs, and clubs hammered their shoulders and backs. O'Kane soon realized why. Japanese survivors from the ships the Tang had sunk were on board. Burned men, wounded men, sailors pulled from burning tankers and exploding cargo vessels who recognized the submarine insignia on the Americans' uniforms. The beatings intensified, but O'Kane later wrote that understanding the attackers' rage made the violence easier to accept. The beatings lasted 3 hours before guards locked the Americans in a below-deck storage compartment with no food, water, or medical treatment. The Tachikaze steamed to Formosa, and the Americans spent 4 days in the storage hold. On October 29th, guards transferred them to a transport ship bound for Japan, a voyage that lasted 2 weeks. On November 13th, the transport docked at Yokohama, and the prisoners were moved to the Ofuna Interrogation Center, 30 miles southwest of Tokyo, a secret facility unknown to the International Red Cross, where prisoners officially did not exist. The 9 Tang survivors joined 60 other Allied prisoners at Ofuna. Navy pilots shot down over the Pacific, B-29 crewmen captured after bombing raids, and submarine sailors from other lost boats. Interrogations began immediately, with Japanese intelligence officers questioning O'Kane for 6 hours daily, demanding convoy routes, radio frequencies, submarine tactics, and recognition codes. O'Kane refused to provide anything beyond his name, rank, and serial number. In response, interrogators cut food rations to 1 bowl of rice per day, prohibited all prisoner communication, and sentenced him to weeks of solitary confinement. December brought daily American B-29 bombing raids over Tokyo, and Ofuna had no air raid shelters. Prisoners remained locked in their cells during attacks, with bombs falling within 2 miles of the camp. In January 1945, the Tang survivors were transferred to the Omori prison camp on Tokyo Bay, where conditions were marginally better, 2 bowls of rice per day, and prisoners could speak to each other. But disease ran rampant in the overcrowded barracks: dysentery, beriberi, pneumonia, with no medical supplies available. Men died weekly from malnutrition and untreated infections, and O'Kane watched as his crew deteriorated. Dilva developed beriberi, Caverly contracted pneumonia, and all 9 lost 30 to 50 pounds. Spring brought rumors. Germany had surrendered in May, American forces had captured Okinawa in June, and Japan faced invasion. On August 6th, guards reported an unusual bombing, 1 aircraft, 1 bomb, destroying Hiroshima. On August 9th, another single bomb hit Nagasaki. On August 15th, Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender over the radio. The war was over. On August 29th, American forces arrived at Omori, and medics found most prisoners in need of immediate hospitalization. On September 2nd, Japan signed the surrender documents aboard the USS Missouri. On September 5th, the 9 Tang survivors boarded a hospital ship bound for Pearl Harbor, having spent 10 months in Japanese captivity. All 9 survived to see home, but the Tang remained on the bottom of the Formosa Strait with 78 crew members who never escaped. O'Kane returned to the United States in October 1945, spending 6 weeks at Naval Hospital San Diego, treating malnutrition and injuries sustained in captivity. On March 27, 1946, President Harry Truman awarded O'Kane the Medal of Honor in a ceremony on the White House lawn, citing his actions during the Tang's final 2 engagements on October 23rd and 24th. Post-war analysis of Japanese shipping logs revised the Tang's war record. Originally credited with 31 ships sunk, 227,000 tons. The revised total was 33 ships sunk, 116,454 tons, making the Tang the most successful American submarine of World War II by both number of ships and total tonnage sunk. The USS Tautog ranked second with 26 ships sunk, and the USS Flasher second in tonnage with 100,000 tons. O'Kane himself ranked first among all American submarine commanders, with no other captain matching his record. The Tang also received 2 Presidential Unit citations and 4 battle stars for its wartime service. O'Kane continued his naval career after the war, commanding the submarine tender USS Peleus, testifying at Japanese war crimes trials, serving as executive officer of the USS Nereus, commanding Submarine Division 32, attending the Armed Forces Staff College, teaching at the Submarine School in New London, and commanding the submarine tender USS Sperry. He retired as a Rear Admiral in 1957. The tactics O'Kane learned from Morton became standard submarine doctrine: surface attacks, aggressive positioning, and firing from inside convoy formations. Every submarine commander after 1944 studied the Tang's patrol reports. O'Kane wrote 2 books about his service: Clear the Bridge, detailing the Tang's war patrols, and Wahoo, documenting his time as Morton's executive officer. Both became required reading at the U.S. Naval Academy. The Navy named the destroyer USS O'Kane DDG-77 in his honor. Commissioned in 1999, the ship remains in active service. O'Kane died on February 16, 1994, at the age of 83, and was buried at Arlington National Cemetery. The Tang's wreck remains undiscovered, resting in 180 feet of water off the China coast. Salvage attempts have never been made due to political tensions in the Formosa Strait. The National World War II Museum in New Orleans created an interactive exhibit called Final Mission: USS Tang Submarine Experience, where visitors enter a recreation of the Tang's interior, receive cards representing one of the 87 crew members, and relive the events of October 24th and 25th, including the final Torpedo's circular run. The Tang's casualty list includes 78 names: men who died in the explosion, drowned in flooded compartments, or perished attempting to escape from 180 feet down. The 9 survivors carried those names with them for the rest of their lives. If this story moved you as it moved us, do us a favor. Hit that like button. Every like tells YouTube to share this story with more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every day. Stories of submariners who broke records with aggression and courage. Real people and real heroism. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. The United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia. Our community spans the globe. You're not just a viewer. You're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for ensuring Commander O'Kane and the Tang's crew don't fade into silence. These men deserve to be remembered, and you're helping make that happen.